What's the creepiest/scariest thing you've seen, but no one believes you? Growing up, I had a friend named Adam. He was never able to come out dying the day, only right before all of us kids had to go home for the evening. Adam lived a few houses over, in a house with an overgrown yard. I met his parents once. They were very strange, didn't smile, and obviously didn't want me there. I remember Adam telling me that he was sick, that's why he couldn't play that much. He was a small boy, pale with dark hair. Eventually, Adam stopped showing up altogether. And I eventually moved on, though I do remember going to his house a couple times to see if he could come play, and his dad just gave me this look before closing the door in my face. Later in life, I asked my sister if she remembered him. She doesn't, and according to my parents, that house was empty the entire time we lived there. I don't know who Adam was. I don't know why I so vividly remember him and his parents. As far as I can tell, he wasn't real, and yet I have perfect memories of him and his parents. When I was 7 or 8, I would have a reoccurring nightmare that one of my dolls came to life, played with me, and then would try to pull me into my closet with her. I'd follow her into the closet at first, but then she'd show me this little door at the back of the closet, and my heart would start to race. I don't know what it was about that door, but I knew something bad would happen if I went through it. I'd start to struggle and try to pull away, but the doll was too strong and would start pulling me through the door. At this point in the dream, I'd always wake up screaming. The worst part was I had night terrors, so sometimes I'd wake up standing next to my closet. Every night before bed, I'd make my parents make sure there wasn't a little door at the back of my closet. There never was. Anyway, I was talking to my mom the other day and this dream came up. I'm laughing about it and how ridiculously paranoid I was about dolls in that closet, but my mom gets really quiet. She tells me the creepy part of that dream wasn't the doll. It was the fact that there used to be a little door at the back of the closet, but when I was 1 year old, they remodeled the house and put a wall where the door used to be. There's no way I could have remembered that door, but years later, I kept dreaming about it. None of my friends believe this story, but I swear it's true. This happened to me last year, and I fully understand why no one believed me because it sounds ridiculous. Every morning, I need to wake up at 5 a.m. to get the 5:30 bus to the train station to go to university. I had to be there by 8 a.m., but I like to get there half an hour early. To get to the bus stop, I have to walk down this bike path and under this bridge to get to this quiet backstreet road. There is fuck all light on the bike path. This street is dead quiet. The right side of the road is a continuation of the bike path, and the left is a normal footpath with a long green hedge. One morning, I was standing there waiting for a bus, and this old woman comes walking out from under the bridge. I didn't see her at first because, as I said, it was pitch black on the bike path. She crosses the road and walks up to me. She asked me if I knew where X road was. I turned to point in the direction of the road she was looking for. I turned back and she was gone. This old woman who was walking at a snail's pace disappeared within 3 seconds. All right, buckle in. My neighbor was dying of a heart condition about 6 years ago. He knew he was, so he was giving away his valuables to people he trusted with them. Neighbor gave me his tackle box. He loved to fish. I would see him come home from fishing every day, and he'd just sit on his porch and skin fish. I just put the tackle box in my closet and didn't really do anything with it since I don't fish. Anyways, soon after, he passed away in his home. Exactly a week after that, I woke up to the tackle box at the foot of my bed. Weird, but my stepdad likes to dick around. Figured it was him, so I put it back. The next morning, I wake up. It's at the foot of my bed again. So, I asked my stepdad what the deal was, and he had no idea what I was talking about. To test this, I put the tackle box in a spot that he wouldn't find, nor would he attempt to get it. Under my bed, all the way in the back against the wall, and I put stuff in front of it to conceal it. Next morning, nothing. Okay, I guess it was him. Didn't give it much thought after that. 3 days pass. I wake up one morning and there it is, at the foot of my bed. Fuck. Now I'm starting to freak out. So I did what any rational person would and I went fishing with it. After I went fishing, I put the tackle box away, and it hasn't moved since then. It's still there. About 8 years ago now, I was taking a drive out to Kansas from the East Coast. I was with a friend, and we were going out to see her grandparents. Once we were about 2 hours from the grandparents' house, my friend starts outlining standard operating procedures of seeing things. in and around her family's home. She seemed a bit panicky when going over everything, but I managed to calm her down. I'm skeptical of everything and assured her that the things she had seen when she was a small child were just manufactured in her imagination. She insisted that the entire family had seen these things, with the exception of her grandparents. 2 hours later, we arrive in Kansas and I'm ready to fall over because of the length of time the last leg of the trip took. We are welcomed and grandmother takes me to a back bedroom, and just as she about to close the door, she stops, says, "Maybe you shouldn't stay in this room," and escorts me to another room. Okay, that was a little strange, but whatever. I'm tired. Fast forward to night number 2 at the grandparents' home. It's around 11 p.m. and my friend is crashed out on the couch watching TV. I'm in an adjacent bedroom from which I can see her laying on the couch. I nod off for the night and wake up to an old gray man that bared a resemblance to the grandfather, but was not the grandfather, standing with his back to me in the doorway, looking at my friend sleeping on the couch. I decided I was going to get up and confront the old gray man, and something slammed me back into the bed. I tried to get up several more times with the same result. Each time I was slammed back into the bed, a voice would repeat, "Put a seal on the door." Finally, I snapped to it's 3 a.m. and everything was normal. I must have been sleeping. It was a dream. No old gray man and my friend was fast asleep. So I start pacing around the room trying to decide how I feel about what had just happened. I glance over to my friend, her eyes are open, and she says, "You seen it?" I say, "Get in the car. I can't be here right now." We spend the next 4 hours sitting in a Walmart parking lot talking about the history of her experiences in that house and comparing to my own. Okay, my nerves are not on fire anymore, and we are heading back to the grandparents' home. We arrive, and they are waiting for us inside. I tell them exactly what happened to me, and I get, "Yeah, that's strange. We usually do seal our doors with a prayer at night, but with all the excitement we just must have forgotten. All the children have mentioned stories of things, but we have never seen them. We are sorry you had to go through that." I'm really not sure what I seen or experienced that night, but when I tell people, they get that look of skepticism. It's obvious they don't believe me. My conclusion is that the experience was indistinguishable from reality in the moment. I don't know what that means, but it changed the way I look at things. This makes me sound fucking crazy, but anyways. It was a warm summer morning back when I was a kid. I was standing in our hallway, putting on my shoes, when I randomly peeked into our living room and saw a see-through male figure surrounded by rainbow-colored light standing right in the middle of the living room. He was reading a book and didn't seem to notice me. I thought it was weird, but I didn't feel scared or anything. It felt like the room was filled with a warm, loving energy, if that makes sense. I kinda just shrugged it off and went about my day, probably because I was too young to really understand what I'd seen. A few days later, when my mom tucked me into bed, she read me a bedtime story about a kid who meets an angel or something like that. Don't remember the story exactly, but what is interesting is the author's description of what that angel looked like. It was exactly the same as the strange rainbow man I had seen in our living room a couple of days before. It even said that angels will often visit humans surrounded by a strong, rainbow-colored lightning and manifest themselves while reading a book starred, asterisk. I casually blurted out, "Oh, I've seen an angel then." And my mom was like, "You have? That's great." And we didn't talk more about that for a while, until one day where I randomly asked my mom if I could see a picture of my granddad, who died unexpectedly while my mom was pregnant with me. She found an old family album, and we looked through pictures of my parents' wedding that happened exactly 1 year before I was born. There was a picture of 3 or 4 people sitting together, laughing and having a great time at the party. I immediately pointed out the guy who sat in the middle and said, "How funny! He looks just like the angel I saw." And my mom's face turned white as a ghost. She was just about to tell me that this was indeed my deceased grandfather, who I never got to meet. I'm very convinced it was him visiting me. I spent one summer in high school living with my aunt and uncle and keeping their 7-year-old daughter for them during the day while they worked. I was up late one night watching TV in the living room. The living room was right off of the kitchen, separated only by an L-shaped bar. I saw my cousin, out of the corner of my eye, walk down the hallway from her room into the kitchen. It was way past her bedtime, so I told her she needed to go back to bed. When I didn't hear her answer, I got up and walked around the bar and into the kitchen. There was no one there. I checked under the bar to see if she was hiding from me, and there was no one there, and nowhere else she could have gone from the kitchen. I walked down the hallway to her room, and she was fast asleep, snoring, so there was no way it was her. It baffled me and freaked me out, because if I didn't see my cousin, who was the little girl that walked into the kitchen? Several years later, I was talking to my aunt, and she nonchalantly brings up the ghost in her house. I laughed it off and she said, "No, I'm serious. We have a ghost. Your uncle and I both have seen her and heard her. We call her Giggles, because we hear her giggling. We usually only see her in the hallway before she disappears." All of a sudden, I remembered the disappearing girl in the kitchen. I asked her what her ghost looked like. She said she had blonde hair with braids and wore a white dress. My cousin is blonde. On the night in question, I thought I'd seen my cousin in a nightgown walk down the hallway, but apparently it was the ghost that resides in my aunt's house. As a Marine, I used to have the graveyard patrol shift at the Beirut bombing memorial. Part of the memorial is dedicated to a veteran's cemetery. Oddly enough, I never got freaked out being completely alone in a remote cemetery, in the middle of the night, surrounded by dense woods on all sides. It was actually kind of peaceful, to be honest. However, one night I was patrolling near the perimeter fence where some of the oldest headstones are, when I heard the sound of a woman humming. I followed the sound and noticed a light glowing through the vines and brush of a large tree. As I approached, I could literally feel my hair beginning to lift as if there was an electric current in the air. I pushed aside the brush, and what I saw nearly took my breath away. It was an old, weathered headstone with a large cross etched into the marble. Only the cross was glowing a bright, vivid blue, like a neon bulb. The humming was also suddenly much louder and had a weird plurality to it, like it was coming from hundreds of voices at once. Needless to say, I freaked the fuck out. I screamed like a scared little girl and sprinted back to the parking lot. I radioed the guard who was supposed to relieve me and forced him to come early, then spent the rest of my shift in the cab of his truck. I don't think he believed me, but he stayed in his truck and didn't go out on patrol until the sun was fully up. A few days later, I worked up the nerve to return to the grave, during the day, of course. As I suspected, in the light of day, it was a completely mundane headstone. There was no name, only the aforementioned cross. I ran my hands over the stone and checked to see if maybe there was some sort of hidden light source or solar panel. But no, it was just plain, solid, unremarkable stone. The humming was gone, too. I eventually returned to my normal shift, but never again experienced anything out of the ordinary. I never learned whose grave that was either, but I find myself thinking about it from time to time. It certainly sounds absurd when I say it out loud, and I suppose it could have been a hallucination or a trick of my tired brain, but I don't believe it was. I think it was real, a ghost or spirit of some sort, but I don't think it was malevolent at all. I woke up to something. It sounded like a door shutting. At first I thought it was a dream because I could hear it in the dream as I was waking up, kind of like when someone calls your name when you're dreaming. But then I looked at my cat. His hair was completely standing up and he was beaming at my bedroom door. So I looked over at the door, and the only way I can describe it is it looked like it was swaying, slowly, like it was breathing, like someone was standing on the other side of it trying to hear if I was awake. This swaying was accompanied by a shadow. Asterisk, I don't mean a supernatural shadow, but it looked like the shadow of a person behind the door. I was paralyzed in fear. I lied there for 5 minutes naked watching this door away. I considered yelling and trying to scare them away, but I was terrified someone might respond. I legitimately thought this was the moment where I will have to defend myself or be killed. I don't own a gun, but after 10 minutes or so, I mustered up the courage to check every room in the house. I fucking checked every corner too. But there was no one there. I don't know what happened, but my evolutionary traits kicked in and I completely believed someone was outside my door. This might end up buried, but I'm going to add it anyways. I work night shift at a hospital, and during the night it's fairly common for us to run out of particular supplies that we need. During the day, there is normally a worker from Central Supply that you can call, and they'll bring up what you need directly to your floor. But at night, we don't have that luxury, so we often have to go down and get it ourselves. Central Supply is the basement of this hospital that has been around since the 40s, so it's creepy enough. I had heard stories about how creepy it was and people getting uneasy feelings while down there alone. I was naive and didn't really believe it until one night I had to go down there by myself. The place is huge and dimly lit with rows of shelves of hospital supplies everywhere. I'm in the middle of these shelves looking for what I need when I just start to feel a shiver run through my entire body. The hair on my neck is standing up and I just get this feeling of complete dread, like I'm not supposed to be there. Then all of a sudden I see this black figure dart past me out of the corner of my eye. At first I thought I was just seeing things because it's like 3 a.m. and I'm tired, so I brush it off. I go to leave and suddenly I hear a huge crash behind me. A variety of supplies were wiped completely off the shelf and all over the floor and in the corner of the room. I just see this black figure-like thing standing there. Every hair on my body is standing up at this point, and I get my ass out of that place as fast as possible. I came back to my floor, and all but one of my coworkers thought I was bluffing. The only one who believed me saw my face, and without me saying anything said to me, "You saw it too, didn't you?" Yeah, I never went down in the basement ever again, lol. Fishing on Lake Minnewanka in Banff National Park with a good friend. About 50 feet from shore. Around 8:30 p.m. I see glowing red eyes. Up in the trees. Like red. Like Predator, I guess. I do a double take, they're gone. I decide not to say anything. Maybe I'm tripping. Did just smoke up? Nope. 5 minutes later my buddy says, "I just seen some glowing red eyes up in the top of those trees." I feel goosebumps. Yup, I saw them too. We look back and they're gone. We decide to aim the boat towards the shoreline. It's not dark yet, but sun is going down. We saw nothing. No owls, no goats in the trails. We didn't get off the boat, but we had a good look around. When I ask him about it, this was around 10 years ago, he just says he doesn't want to talk about it. I can't blame him. But after all these years, I've never heard or seen anything like those glowing red eyes, 30 to 40 feet up in the trees, staring at us. I copied and pasted this next part. I knew nothing about the history when we went fishing there. For more than 100 centuries, people hunted and camped along the original shores of Lake Minnewanka. The Stony people called it Minwaki, or Lake of the Spirits. They respected and feared this lake for its resident spirits. The early Europeans called it Devil's Lake. I used to go camping there. I do not anymore. Mostly because it's bear country for most of the summer. But yeah, also because of those bright red eyes. I will never forget that. Most surreal thing I've ever seen. I used to have a buddy that lived in the same neighborhood, a few streets over. One night we were having a couple of beers in his backyard while playing cards. I had some things to do the next morning, so just before 10 I said my goodbyes and shoved off. It was a short walk, maybe 15 minutes door to door, so I never drove. Anyway, it was a nice night, uneventful trip. But when I got home, my roommate was coming out the front door, coffee in hand, and dressed for work. He gave me a funny look and said he thought I was asleep since my truck was in the driveway. I told him where I'd been and asked why he was going into work at night. That's when he kind of laughed and asked if I was drunk. We stared at each other for a minute, and then he told me it was just after 5 in the morning and he was going in just like he usually did. In my entire life, I'd never felt more confused than I did in that moment. I could tell he was dead serious, but I knew I had just left my friend's house. I checked my phone and sure enough, 5-something in the a.m. My roommate left for work. I paced circles in the living room for a bit, then called the friend whose house I'd just left. He groggily answered and confirmed I'd left at 10 the previous evening. I have no idea what happened during those 7 hours of my life, and it gives me chills to think about it all these years later. I wasn't drunk, I wasn't tired. No one could have slipped anything in either of the 2 Coors Lights I'd had. No known medical conditions that would have caused me to black out, and nothing has happened like it since. I just don't know what happened to that time. I was walking to class from the dining hall on my campus when I saw a lady yelling for help and banging on a window of a nearby building. Lots of people were walking past, but I was the only one who seemed to acknowledge it. I went to the window to help, and she told me she was locked in a room in the building and that she needed me to come in and open the door. Now, I have no idea the layout of this building and where she was located, so I decided to call campus security for help despite her pleading with me not to call them and to just let her out. I call them, and when I hear them coming I go to greet them, so I can take them to the window. I leave for maybe a maximum of 15 seconds, and when I return with campus security she is gone. We can't see her at the window and campus security goes inside to double check, and sure enough, there is no trace of her. Campus security definitely thought I was crazy, and I'm sure my professor thought I was full of shit when I explained to him why I was late. No one seems to believe me that this happened, but I swear it did. FAQs. I am female / it is a very old campus with lots of random historic buildings that people don't really use, and this building was one of them / the area has a very high crime rate, so it probably was a robbery. Okay, so I was flicking through these and told my girlfriend about one, and she hit me up with these stories. Just some background, she is a dedicated science brain and not superstitious at all. When she was growing up, 4 to 15 years of age, she would often wake up in the middle of a disturbed sleep to see an old woman perched at the end of her bed. This woman was not someone that she recognized. The old lady would soothe her back to sleep, often patting her feet at the end of her bed. The strange thing about this is her sister, a few years older, also had similar experiences seeing the old lady. They both shared a room, but would see her at different times. We doubt very much it was someone coming into their rooms at night. Both her and the sister also recalled seeing a man popping his head out from behind their tall kitchen cupboard, smiling and then going back behind it. Turns out that from his description, the family believed it was a neighbor who passed away and used to play hide and seek with them and his children. Personally, I've never experienced anything supernatural. Found reading this thread and talking to her about it very interesting. Smiley face. Edit. Thanks for all the votes and comments. One of my first big posts on Reddit. Great seeing the love. We both woke up all giddy. My GF divulged further that the house they lived in used to be owned by an elderly woman who kept it super clean and was a very caring member of the community. Apparently, she died 3 days after they signed the lease.